really kind of just put the finishing touches on how to work at a disaster or a mass casualty incident. Now, here's our book definition. An MCI is declared when there's 3 or more patients, there's a lack of resources, or the amount of patients just overwhelms the resources available. Excuse me. So what that means is, really, even small scale incidents can be declared an MCI. It doesn't have to be this big, like, marathon 9/11, huge all encompassing thing. All it has to do is be, 5 or 10 patients in some podunk little spot that's hours away from everywhere, and you can have a true real for life mass casualty incident. That's why when they talk in those FEMA classes that you guys are working on about like scalability and the ability to just branch out and branch out and branch out and work huge MCI type issues that have lots of jurisdictions, lots of people, lots of damage, lots of patients, we can also work that in the other direction and use the ability of the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System to work even the littler scale, working incidents. What this is really trying to do is make things efficient. Now, you have seen pretty much at this point all that I can show you about how to work up a patient. And you probably have gotten to the point now where you understand that there's a lot that goes into just one patient. Now picture that as like 500 people, 1,000 people. And you can see where the efficient and direct way that we've shown you how to do these things can sort of be a detractor from a large scale incident. And one of the big things that always falls by the wayside in these types of things, can you guess what it is? Because it's not patient care and the ability of the team. What do you guys think one of the big things that's difficult to address in a big incident is?
Scene safety.
Scene safety. Eric, I think you were in there.
Maybe something to do with like proper assisting.
It's really communications. If you look at the failure point prior to a lot of this incident management stuff taking place, communications is the big one. If you look at things like the Aurora, Colorado shooting that happened at the movie theater, the communications to that, once that went sort of to hell, the whole incident sort of started to fall apart. Where if you look at things like the marathon bombing, where the communications were instantaneous and spot on perfect, you watched things happen well. Communications is one of the big things that you always need to be mindful of if you're ever involved in really anything. Once you fail at communications, the rest of the incident has absolutely no ability to go right from there on out. And incident management and the FEMA system and ICS really played a role in making things efficient and coordinated so that the left hand and the right hand, whether it's regional, state, or national, everybody knows what everybody's doing and everybody is able to sort of be interchangeable parts at that point. This all came around in 2004. It really just is a framework that allows everybody to work together, whether it's federal, state, local government, private companies like Cataldo, you name it. It puts everybody on the same page, in the same playbook, and gets everybody pulling in the same direction. One of the good things that it allows us to do is to be very flexible. It is not written in stone. When we talk about incident management and we talk about ICS, it gives terminology, it gives classification to resources, yes. Does it provide some training? Absolutely. You guys are working on that right now. Does it allow for some sort of certification downstream? Absolutely it does. But really one of its main benefits is it really is adaptable. You know, you can take the bits and pieces that you need from all of this ICS structure and the incident management system and deploy it and employ it as the situation dictates. Because what do you think about, you know, operating in one of these incidents like a mass casualty, or, you know, later you'll talk about terrorists and bombings and all that kind of stuff. What's something that jumps like right to the forefront of your mind?
Command structure and command control.
Command structure and command control for sure, because without that, it's chaos. It is meant to be chaotic. You know, you think of, you know, things like the hurricanes that happened a few years back down in the southeast, or any of the large scale like terrorist type stuff, or even something as simple as a train derailment. The scene is going to be chaotic. And without really defined command roles, you have no idea where ambulances are transporting people to. You have no idea where, you know, whether or not everyone's been triaged. You have no idea the capabilities of the local resources as far as how many hospitals, how many, you know, red, yellow, and green patients can each hospital take. And the whole thing just devolves into outright chaos. And incident management is really something that puts the brakes on that. It stops something that's already a giant pain in the neck from getting any worse. Because one of the things that it talks about, and really some of the stuff that you guys will be involved in here in the not too distant future and going forward forever and ever, amen, is the preparedness part of it. You know, fire departments don't just have trainings, and emergency services people don't just have trainings because they love to throw money to the wind. You can't get good at what you're doing, what you don't work on, what you don't prepare for. And some of this preparedness and some of the additional training and things that we go over here really feed this whole incident management system. You know, we already talked about communications. Information management is sort of like the public information sector. You know, I told you guys way back in the very beginning when we talked about HIPAA, if somebody sticks a microphone in your face, don't say a word. Play Mickey the Dunce and walk right by them, because that's not my piece. I can tell you that for sure. I don't ever want to be the person in charge for doling out information. I'd rather be boots on the ground, dragging people through the rubble. Communications is another big thing that National Incident Management took a look at, and they standardized and really kind of gave us a different language to speak. Any of you guys who have taken these FEMA classes or are currently working on them, you've probably seen that they kind of make words up, don't they? You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, you look at it and you go, what the hell does that even mean? And then Dr. Google helps you figure out what it is that they're talking about. Believe me, Dr. Google helped me through those classes as well. You know, resource management, command and management, that's going to just be what's available and who can give what. You know, when the gas line explosions happened up in the Merrimack Valley, and resources were coming in from places as far away as Maine, because the incident just grew and grew and grew and grew, and anybody who had available apparatus and personnel that's part of this whole resource management called in through all of these mutual aid agreements and started sending apparatus to take care of the fact that a large swath in a major metropolitan spot in Massachusetts was either blowing up or on fire. That is something that doesn't happen without this incident management system. Because I'll tell you, as someone who worked in a communication center that was involved in all of that, unless there is some sort of structure behind how an area is going to respond to that kind of thing. I worked for a private company. My ambulances are my ambulance, and we need to accomplish the business of the company. Yes, it's for the greater good of the public, But unless there is something driving that whole greater good of the public, we would have just been out humping calls, discharging people from the local hospitals, and that's the way that that would have gone. Without some of this resource management stuff that FEMA came up with, things just don't get accomplished because there's not enough people. So first and foremost, like we talk about all the time, responder and public safety. The purpose of ICS is to not create any more patients once this has all been enacted. As soon as an incident is declared and somebody takes command, their main goal is to make sure you guys are safe and to make sure the public is safe. And anything that interferes with either one of those two things becomes part of the incident management goal. The incident management goal is to stop the death and destruction and limit the amount of trouble that this incident is causing, efficiently use the resources to attack and manage and get this drawn to a successful conclusion. And really, the successful conclusion is no further death, no further damage. The incident comes under control, and sooner rather than later, we start to now demobilize. Because once the incident is under control and things are moving in the right direction, everybody goes back to business as usual. Those fire trucks returned to Maine and places further off. And things start to get back to more business as usual once that is really advisable. One of the big things I mentioned, and I talk about this from cardiac arrest management straight through till today, which is your last lecture of EMT class, it's going to control duplication and really limit people's ability to freelance. What do you guys think we talk about when we use words like control of duplication and avoid freelancing?
I would assume, I guess, people kind of going off on their own. Command supervisors or anything, they don't really know, what their guys are doing. They're not telling anyone. They're just kind of going off on their own, doing everything, and command doesn't have control of what their guys are doing. They have no idea.
For sure. And I think one of the big things that they talk about in sort of command and control is you can't really effectively supervise more than, I think it was 6 people. It's a small number, especially at something like this that is fluid. And this whole duplication piece that they talk about is really to make sure that 2 teams aren't off trying to accomplish the same thing, because you're wasting people at that point. We talk at length about not wasting people and everybody gets a job, right? Well, if you start having the same, 2 people head off to do the same thing at the same place at the same time, we have gotten to the point now where we're just throwing people away, and that's not going to be helpful. And Mike, you were spot on with the whole freelancing piece. Really, when you're at a large scale incident, you don't do anything until somebody above you tells you to. That's just, there's a period at the end of that. Because the minute you start running off doing God knows what, God knows where, you are, first of all, lost in the shuffle. And the people who are supposed to be in charge of you now have absolutely no idea where you are. Then you're going to be a draw on the whole communication side because you have no ability to let anybody know. And if you do, now you're just jamming up the radio waves and getting in contact with people you didn't need to. Because one of the things they try to do is limit how much actual radio traffic there is, because the radio gets out of sight. So until somebody tells you something, you just stage and wait for somebody to come along and tell you where you should go and how you should get there and what you should do when you get there. The different branches of this whole working sort of mosaic of emergency services is going to be operations, planning, logistics, and finance. We'll get into the roles and responsibilities here in just a little bit, but underneath all of that, you have the incident commander. The incident commander talks to the operations chief. The operations chief talks to their branch management. The branch managers will go down to their division or their group and start giving out the orders. And that's when the boots on the ground mobilize into effect. So it's really sort of direct person to person to person. The information gets passed and things start going, things start moving. The operations, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? What do you think operations is in charge of?
Operations.
Yeah, the actual accomplishing of the things. Planning, again, pretty straightforward. These are the people that are in charge of the planning of the things. Logistics and finance work pretty well hand in hand with planning and each other, because logistics is sort of working out the hows, right? Planning says these are the things that needs to be accomplished, and logistics are the ones that says these are how we're going to accomplish these things. And then finance works on actually getting all of this nightmare paid for. So the incident commander, this goes without saying, the incident commander is in charge of the whole incident. Everyone should know who the incident commander is and how to communicate with that person and where the command post is located. But generally speaking, it's not going to be in your task to actually communicate with this person. If you guys were the first truck in on, a structural collapse, or let's say a huge motor vehicle collision with 10 patients down in the middle of the street, and your ambulance is the first one that gets there, one of you is going to be incident command until somebody else shows up. So incident command is initially established, and they're the person in charge of relaying information and sort of requesting the additional resources and working through what is going to be necessary to fix this problem right now. And then shortly thereafter, somebody with more experience, more training in this incident will show up, and thank you, sweet baby Jeebus, you'll be able to pass off that, because being in charge of something like this, I don't even want to have to do. Incident command is really just the person running the show, pulling the strings and making the final decisions. Financing, like I said, that's pretty straightforward. They are the people responsible for any expenditures, any money spent. And they are the ones that get things paid for. They are the ones that will basically the bean counters and the check writers. Logistics, they're responsible for the bits and pieces. They are the ones that are working with finance and working with planning to get the communications up and running, to get the equipment there. Food, water, fuel, lighting, supply, they are the ones that are feeding all of the necessary stuff, because it's not like you're going to go out there and run for days on end with no food, no water, no lights, because, well, it gets dark. You'll eventually run out of things like tourniquets and chest seals, or if you're in the treatment and transport area, bandaging and ambulances and fuel. So logistics plays a huge, hefty role in making sure everything that is needed by operations is available to them. This is going to be the people that are out responding to and tactically managing all of what needs to be managed. The operations people are the ones that go and carry out the orders. Planning, they're going to not only ahead of the incident start developing an action plan, but they also are the ones who squash out all the little pop-up fires that present themselves as things begin to unfold. Incident command will also have some different command staff. The command staff is going to be the safety officer. The safety officer is someone who can come along and shut down any incident that is really determined to be detrimental to the people around. So if you guys are out working something like this and the safety officer comes along to monitor what's going on and they deem it to be unsafe, that stops immediately as soon as the safety officer says, this is unsafe, we need to do something about shoring up this or fixing that so that it's not hazardous to the responders. Why do you think that's such an integral role in the command staff?
Because first responders, you're going to get hung up trying to help the people at hand. So you need someone who's kind of stepping back, looking at the overall situation to assess the hazards that are, going to put the first responders at risk, because if they go down, then no one's able to help patients.
Yeah, you got to have somebody who can pull the reins and go, oh, if that wall comes down, those 9 guys are dead. Get them out of there. Let's fix that first. Because you're absolutely right. It is very easy to get that one-track mind working in one direction and be a runaway train at some point. Just doing, this is my job and this is the job that I'm going to do. And you don't even realize sort of some of the stuff that's going on around you and some of the hazards that could present themselves to you because, well, this is the task I was given and this is the task I will accomplish. Public information, God bless whoever gets that job. You have to talk to the media, you have to give out information and make sure it's digestible to the general public. And really, you are the face of the whole developing problem as it sort of works its way through. I mentioned before, communications is the weak point. Communications remains the weak point. Everybody, for the most part now, has the ability to integrate communications so that we can work with each other's radios and, I can talk on your channel, you can talk on my channel. It allows for us to get information back and forth to one another pretty quickly. But now think of something where there might be 100, 200 pieces of apparatus and 500, 600, 700 people responding to the incident. And then think of that one lonely radio channel that everybody's going to try and talk on. It turns into an absolute catastrophe. The more people that are talking and the more people that are jamming up the airwaves. We check in with the commander when we get there. Some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is really done face to face. You arrive at the scene, you check in, somebody tells you where to go. You report to your supervisor tells you what to do. And this is all face to face, in-person type stuff. Somebody will mark down who you are, where you're from, and where you are, because it makes things accountable. Everybody needs to be where they're supposed to be, because otherwise, if I'm the incident commander talking to my operations section about starting to transport some of these patients, and all the ambulances that I expected to be available to transport these patients are off doing that whole freelancing thing and haven't communicated to anyone what's going on, guess what I don't have? I don't have ambulances to transport patients at that point. And that is how we wind up with more unnecessary loss of life, which means people die for absolutely no reason because there was 100 people doing 100 different things and nobody was doing any of the stuff that they were supposed to. One of the big things, preparedness. You can't be good at things that you aren't prepared for. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants. That's why all of this ICS and FEMA training is required. It is something that to work on an ambulance, you need to have. Realistically speaking, you guys are going to get plenty of exposure to this. You guys are going to do plenty of training. Preparedness, as far as an agency thing goes for most of the local fire departments that I'm aware of, it's pretty straightforward. You guys know what the task at hand is. You always know who's in charge. That person gives an order and that order is carried out. One of the things that you all are absolutely great at is that aspect of, this is my job, this is the job that I'm going to do when I'm given it. And those things get carried out. You know, if we're talking police and fire, that's probably one of the things that you all have over a private EMS to begin with, because private EMS, everybody wants to question every decision that's made. That's just sort of the nature of the beast. And in an incident where there may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 people injured or dead and dying, we don't have time for such stuff. There's just no time for that kind of nonsense. If you are the initial responders, these are the things that you need to think of the minute you realize that you're about to be overwhelmed by something. These are your 3 questions that you need to always answer the minute you realize there are way too many people here for my lonely ambulance. What do I have? Well, really, at the end of the day, if it's just the 2 of you, guess what you have? You have 1 person to triage and 1 person to be in charge. That's all you have at the moment. What do I need is more important. What do I need is going to start moving pieces towards you so that this incident, big or small, doesn't get any bigger right from the very beginning. So asking for what you need early in an interaction is going to be significantly important. You know, being straight up and saying, you know, there's 25 people down in this office building from a suspected carbon monoxide leak. What do I have? I have myself and my partner, and we can't even go into that building right now. What do I need? I need hazardous material. I need somewhere in the neighborhood of about 14, 15 more ambulances right this very minute. And I need more fire to vent this large office building. I need probably electric and power in case it's some other kind of gas leak. So I need the gas company as well. And it starts to sort of mushroom itself out from there. But go big. Ask for additional resources and mean it. You know, it stinks to wind up short, right? Nobody likes that. Doesn't matter if it's payday or if it's a huge, you know, building collapse or something crazy. You'd always like to have more people. I would much prefer to see people standing around doing nothing, waiting for something to do, than to be on the air screaming for more people and more apparatus and more this and more that and more the next thing. And then what do I need to do? Well, that's pretty straightforward as well. If it's just you and your partner, 1 person runs the show, 1 person is figuring out what do we have, what do we need, what is going on. And the other person is out doing their best to sort. Triage really is just a French word that means to sort. We are sorting people. It's not an easy task. It's not a very rewarding task because you wind up leaving a lot of people hurt and bleeding and banged up and God knows what, because your job is just to sort. Command needs to be established early. It says by the most senior official. A lot of times it's really going to be a coin flip. You need to be in constant communication if you are the person who winds up in incident command, and request anything and everything that you think that you may need early. Get out in front, because if you are, it's just like treating shock, right? If you're already behind, it's going to take more time. You know, ambulances don't just show up from nowhere. Fire apparatus from Maine don't just arrive in North Andover in 5 minutes. So asking for the resources that are necessary or that you think to be necessary early on in the game is going to be important. We try to limit the use of radio as much as possible because it just, things get gummed up, people get missed, things get missed. It winds up sort of difficult to manage. We don't use 10 codes or any other sort of colloquial signals anymore, or we try not to anyhow, because something simple like 10-4, 10-100, 10 this, 10 the next thing can mean something different to the other people that are showing up to this incident. But if I say received, everybody understands the word received and they know what I mean when I say that. Okay, skip this one and move on to here. So the EMS branch in Incident Command and in this structure has three main goals: triage, treatment, and transport. In the field, when we're triaging folks, we are really just tagging people and sorting them out. There needs to be a lot of people on hand to do that, especially if there's a lot of people scattered over a wide area. We always want to keep our own safety in mind, and we always keep in contact with the triage supervisor or the triage manager to let them know how far along we are. It may be necessary to establish a morgue. Who knows? From there, once everybody is sorted, things kind of separate out a little bit. We move to treatment and transport. Treatment is working through all those people who just got sorted out and figuring out what you can do to assist them. During triage, there's very small amount of things we actually do as far as treating someone. We'll open an airway, we'll put on a tourniquet, we'll apply a chest seal. That's realistically about it. If your patient doesn't respond to or doesn't make it through those three things, they're going to wind up as a black tag. Because out there, you know, when there's 100 people on the ground out there doing CPR on anybody who happens to be in cardiac arrest, we're just allowing other people to go into cardiac arrest. You know, as far as the EMS branch goes, we're trying to do the most good for the most amount of people. Once triage and treatment and all that stuff is starting to be accomplished, transportation begins sort of in the midst. You know, transportation is taking the people who need to be extricated and removed from scene right this very minute in order to have a chance of survival to hospitals. You know, the communications branch is going to be in touch. The incident command staff is going to be in touch with all of the local hospitals and figure out how many critically ill patients they can take, how many less critically ill patients they can take, and how many walking wounded they can take. And then transportation is responsible for dispersing those people as far as resources allow. Treatment doesn't begin until all patients have been triaged. That's just a fact of the matter. There's no reason to start treating people until everyone's triaged. The treatment supervisor is going to set up a treatment area and separate it out with red, yellow, and green. Our red patients are the ones who are, and you'll learn some more about this a little bit later on, and we'll talk about how to triage people today a little bit when you get here too. But our red patients are the ones who are most critically ill or injured. Our yellow patients are what we would call delayed, or people that can wait a little while before they go and before their condition devolves. And then our green patients are the ones that they're our walking wounded. They're the ones who require the least amount of treatment. They have the least possibility of going south in a hurry, and they're the patients that can wait. All right, here we go. Here's how we triage. Our red tag patient are patients that require immediate transport. Patients who need immediate transport are going to fall into these typical injury patterns. So they have airway or breathing compromise, they have uncontrolled or severe bleeding, some sort of severe sort of comorbid medical problem, signs and symptoms of shock, severe burns, open chest injuries. So these are all things that you would think were pretty significant injuries all by themselves, free from this whole mass casualty incident, right? If you look at any of those, and we have compromise to airway breathing, circulation, we have some sort of significant medical history, signs and symptoms of shock, so pale, cool, diaphoretic, tachycardic, tachypnic, severe burns, or open injuries to the abdomen or chest. That's someone that you expect would be pretty sick to begin with, right?
Yeah.
All right. So moving down to our yellow tagged patients or our delayed folks, people with some burns, but maybe not severe or significant amounts, but they don't have any airway compromise. Patients who have major or multiple bone and joint injuries, so ortho injuries, or some sort of back injury, but no neurologic deficit. So we've moved a little bit less significant here. And then our green folks are going to be the walking wounded, the people that when you hop on the PA and say, anyone that can hear me and walk, I want you to walk yourself over here. And then last but not least, our black, or Boston calls them blue tags. These are patients who are obviously dead or going to be dead. These are patients who don't respond to those airway maneuvers and using a jaw thrust and an OPA to secure their airway. If they don't start breathing appropriately from there, they get a black tag or a blue tag, depending on where you're working. But why do we actually tag these patients in such a fashion?
To prioritize who's gonna like take the ride to the hospital first, pretty much.
Yeah, and it allows us to quickly identify them. You look at this tag hanging off of your patient and you see, all right, this is this patient, and once they get to the treatment area, they start marking down on the back of that tag what's going on with the patient and start to attempt anyway to stabilize some of those injuries until they're transported to the hospital. But if you look at somebody and you see a red tag hanging off of them, you know that they have some significant problems going on. It helps keep an accurate record. It helps sort of just make sure that sick people don't get missed. And that's something to keep in mind. Like, we need to make sure we're on about the business of getting people where they need to be in the best shape and condition they can be there, and not sort of misplacing people, because that's something that's easy to do too. When we triage adults, so we're going to talk two different types of triage. Adults is very easy. The START triage stands for simple triage and rapid transport. That sounds to me like a National Registry question if I ever heard one. Simple triage and rapid transport. So your first step, this is how we get our greens. Call out to everyone that's close by and send them to somewhere that is easily identifiable, like, I don't know, an Everett Fire Department ambulance. If they can walk to you, they can hear you, they can follow your instruction, or if they are someone who maybe has an ankle fracture, but someone can help them limp to you, they still heard you, followed your instruction, and wound up where you are, guess what all those people get?
Green.
Green tags. The next step is probably more important, because that's going to be our non-walking patients. These are the people that cannot make it to me. This is where we decide yellow, red, or black. These are the people that are probably going to be okay, probably won't be okay if we don't get them out of here, or didn't make it at all. And what we are assessing quick, fast, and in a hurry is respiratory rate, hemodynamic status, and neurologic status. How on earth do you think we do that?
Our general primary assessment.
It's really just primary assessment. Our respiratory rate. A respiratory rate of above 30 is going to get a red tag, period. A capillary refill that is delayed is going to get a red tag. A patient with an altered mental status is going to get a red tag. Break it down to RPM, like your car. Respirations, pulse, mental status. And if they pass those three things, their respiratory rate's below 30. Hemodynamically, when we check a pulse or check their capillary refill, it's brisk, it's less than 2. And they can follow simple instruction. Here's your yellow tag, we'll be with you soon. If they have a rapid respiratory rate, they're hemodynamically unstable, or they have an altered mental status, here's your red tag, we're going to be with you right now. There's a few minor differences when we talk about dealing with our pediatric patients. Our pediatric patients are going to have a bit of a different sort of flow to them. If our pediatric patient isn't breathing, we open their airway. If our pediatric patient isn't breathing and we open their airway and they don't immediately start to breathe on their own, we're actually going to give 5 rescue breaths to see if we can start getting them breathing on their own. If we give those 5 rescue breaths and the patient doesn't start breathing on their own, they're going to be a black tag. If they begin to breathe after those 5 rescue breaths, well, you found problems with respiratory rate, pulse, hemodynamic status, and neurologic status, they're a red tag. If your pediatric patient passes all of those things, guess what color tag they get?
Yellow?
Yellow. It really is straightforward. It's meant to be simple. They give them all these names. They're going to show, I'm pretty sure they show us a picture here in a minute of like the flow chart of all this, but it's really like straight to the point. Respirations, pulse, and mental status. That's what we're evaluating. If our patient doesn't pass those 3 things, they get a red tag. If they do pass those 3 things, they get a yellow tag. Doesn't mean that they're not sick.
So tell me, for pediatric patients, the only difference would be the 5 rescue breaths after they're pronounced black tag?
Yep, if you give them the 5 rescue breaths and they don't start breathing on their own, they get a black tag. If you give them the 5 rescue breaths and then they start to breathe on their own, they'll get a red.
And then right back to business as usual with the triage.
Yep.
Okay.
So here's a couple of special little bits and pieces. Patients who are hysterical and disruptive, it is best to just get rid of those people. So we do. They get a red tag and they get sent on their merry way, because the more people that are there causing this to get worse, the worse it's going to get. So get rid of those folks. If they're being a pain in the neck because they're hysterical and they're scared and they're in some sort of like psychogenic shock and they're really being a nuisance, bye-bye. They go on their merry way with a red tag. Same as if one of us were to get hurt or become injured or ill, rescuers get a red tag regardless of what's wrong with them. Why do you think that is?
Because it's ultimately safety first for us, and without the extra help, I mean, you're obviously going to lose more victims.
And really the main reason, how focused are people going to be on the task at hand if they know that, their coworkers are dropping in the field and just being left there. It's mental chess. It really is. You get an immediate tag if you go down in the field at one of these incidents because it's the right thing to do more than anything else. You start to lose momentum a little bit the more people have to worry about what's going to happen to me if I go down while this is all happening. And it's been shown that that is the best way to manage this. Now, if a rescuer goes down from something regarding the incident, they are triaged as immediate and they get sent out with a red tag. All right, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll finish this lecture off. We're just about done. Why don't we take 10 minutes and we will come back and get through the rest of incident management.
All right, are you guys back?
Yeah.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, so I'm gonna fill in for Tommy for a couple minutes. I'm gonna try and pick up where he left off. He had to step out. Did he go over this slide here? The disaster management?
Yes.
Okay. So when we're managing a disaster, I'm not sure where he left off, so I'm gonna try not to bore you guys. But disasters or any MCI show up and report to command or the staging officer, wherever you're ordered to report to, and go from there, because they may be assigning you, large scale MCIs. If you're not one of the first trucks in, you're probably actually just showing up to a triage area and picking up patients that have already been triaged. In terms of hazmat stuff, this is going to be more fireside than it is EMS. But firstly, like any terrorist MCI disaster incident, step back, scene safety, right? We want to assess what's going on, keep ourselves safe. Don't run in there. If there's, a random tank truck that's on fire and smoking, if I'm on the ambulance, I'm not running in there. I'm going to wait and let fire do their thing. Because if you get hurt, what happens? Never mind on a large scale incident, but even let's just say we go to someone's house for a fall and you fall down the stairs. Now you're hurt, your patient's still hurt. Now we need, one ambulance is out of service because you're hurt. We need one for the patient and we need one for you. So now you're tying up 3 units. So it's just like anything, don't go running into any scene. HAZWOPER is the hazardous materials worker. I don't remember the rest of it. It's a certification you can get for awareness level for people that work with hazardous materials. So it's about understanding the associated risks and the potentials of an accident. It's a very introductory level thing. It just talks about areas of HAZWOPER. So how do you recognize a hazmat incident? Look at the scene, identify critical visual indicators. So what's a critical visual indicator? You guys are the fire class, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you guys, if you don't have any fire experience already, you're gonna grab all of this when you get your fire training. I'm assuming you guys are getting cross-trained, correct?
Yeah, well, our primary thing is firefighter, now in EMT.
Okay, perfect. So a lot of you probably already have a little bit of experience with this stuff, but placards on the trucks, you see a gasoline tanker going down the road, it's got a red placard on it. It's got different numbers for whatever it may be carrying, gasoline versus diesel fuel and heating oil. They're all different numbers. Railroad cars are a big one. There's a lot of identifying information on railroad cars, different numbers. We've got the yellow books, the emergency response guidebooks. You also have the NIOSH book, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So those are all tools you can use to identify what you might potentially be dealing with. Best thing for us to do at the responder level is get more resources and get who you're going to need there. So this is telling you anything can be involved in a hazmat incident, trucks, trains, whatever. You would be amazed at some of the stuff trucks carry. You look at an Amazon truck going down the road and you say, what the hell is in there? I have no idea. I worked a little bit at UPS. I have no idea what packages are in the back of my truck. Not a fucking clue in the world, right? I could be transporting a bomb in a UPS truck and have no idea, honestly. So you just got to maintain that situational awareness and realize you never know. The other thing with trains is that trains carry all sorts of random cargo. So you may be having fuel shipped via train, you may be having other cargo, and it's all mixed together. So you really want to pay attention to what's labeled and figure that stuff out to treat whatever incident you've got to deal with offhand. Again, this is all geared more, I'd say, fire and hazmat side operations level as opposed to your EMT BLS level, but we got to cover it anyways. Tanks in the ground can rot. It's what this slide is saying. And cars crash and their gas tanks can rupture. Deep stuff. So storage locations, occupancy and location. Wide variety of chemicals are stored in a wide range of locations. Prime example, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, any of those big stores. They have all sorts of stuff in there, right? We're going to cover terrorism in the next chapter. I'm going to go over it with you guys, but I mean, realistically, anyone can go to Home Depot and get all the stuff they need to make some kind of improvised explosive. People mix chemicals, household cleaning chemicals when mixed together can be very detrimental, create a hazardous incident. So just pay attention to where you are in the scene around you. Keep a heightened sense of suspicion, all of that. Containers, any vessel that holds a material, size, shape, material are important clues. So bulk and non-bulk. So little 20-pound grill propane tank versus the propane tank at the hardware store that they use to refill your tank. Again, bulk, large quantities of a particular chemical surrounded by a secondary containment system. So exactly, they have leak fields generally. In my town where I grew up and where I work, we have a liquefied natural gas plant where they store bulk quantities of LNG all summer. They fill the tanks up, and then during peak usage in the winter, they empty the tanks out and use that stored product to supplement the usage in the wintertime, because people are using their heat and stuff in the winter. You have more demand. But that also means we have 3 tanks that, I forget their quantity. I think they're like 12 million gallons each, I think. So 36 million gallons of fuel that we're dealing with. Surrounding those tanks is a giant, field of gravel, and then there's ditches on the other side. So if there were ever a leak, it would try and contain it within that area. These are all different types of containers. So this container here is an intermodule container. So this can be shipped via rail or via truck. A lot of you'll see these like with shipping containers. They're the same outside dimension, the steel frame here, and these holes around here. There's little pins on the trucks and trains that these containers will lock into. Small storage tanks, drums, bags, carboys, cylinders. You don't know what's in here. Right now at work, we have a container like this full of disinfecting stuff. So it's not labeled. So just be mindful of things that aren't labeled. These are the DOT marking systems that I was talking about. So 1993, I believe, is fuel oil or diesel fuel. You can use that number to research your ERG book. So more placards here just showing you what they are. These are different warning labels for hazardous materials, the different classifications. The stuff's all in your book. DOT does not require that all chemical shipments be marked. So you don't know what could be inside any of these packages if it's not marked or not required to be marked. You think you can go on Amazon and buy, household cleaning product and it just ships in the regular Amazon box. So stuff like that. Just be mindful. You may not necessarily know what it is. If you get on the job and your officer asks you to get the 2021 ERG, they're just playing with you. These are released every 2 years on the even years, so 2010, 12, 14, etc. We had a 2020, and we should be getting a 2022. So the way you use this, you can flip through it and you can search by name or number, I believe. It's been a while since I've opened one. MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet. Places are required to keep MSDSs of all the chemicals they use. So like even here we have in our garages, we used to have a binder, MSDS, and it contains all the safety information about the bulk windshield washer fluid we have, and the drum of motor oil, and the cleaning chemicals we have, all of that stuff. Chemical makeup, potential hazards, appropriate first aid, pertinent information. Shipping papers, also known as a bill of lading in trucking. Whenever you're transporting materials, you'll have the shipping info about it. You will have the name of the company doing it, the identifying material of what is being shipped, and the quantity and weight. So that's important if you're dealing with a hazmat incident, to know how much you're potentially dealing with. Chemtrec is an organization, the Chemical Transportation Emergency Center. I forget where they're located, somewhere down on the East Coast, I believe. They have a ton of information about different chemicals. You can call them in an emergency, and most companies use Chemtrec. They'll be able to help you with different information regarding how to manage the incident. You can see a leak, you can smell things. Not all things can be smelled, so such as carbon monoxide, odorless, colorless, tasteless, right? But if you have a fuel tanker that's leaking, you're going to be able to see the leak. If something has a cloud or strange smoke, you're going to be able to see that. Keep a safe distance, call a hazmat team, assess the situation, provide as much info as you can. Don't go back in, avoid contacting material. This wants you to use your PA system to tell people to get away. So here's a good one: warm zone, cold zone. Right now we generally have like hot, warm, and cold. This actually does have hot, warm, and cold. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. So your hot zone is where your emergency is. Warm is where you're going to decon, prepare to make entry. Cold is supposed to be what's considered the safe zone. Triage, treat, transport. That's your job. If you're first arriving to any major incident, you're going to be triaging. Get people separated. We've probably already covered triage, but if you can walk, come to my voice. Walking wounded, going through and identifying who needs to be seen first. You may potentially have to make that decision that someone is beyond the point of assistance. If they're already deceased, or if not, soon to be deceased, you may have to make that decision as well. NFPA 704, this is the diamond, classifies materials based on health hazards, fire hazards, chemical, reactive, and special hazard. So health risks, the higher the number, the greater the toxicity. This shows you what protection you need. It's going to talk about all different types of PPE. So level A is a fully encapsulated chemical resistant suit. So the big orange, yellow suits, they wear a Scott pack or an SCBA underneath that, so they're on their own air supply. Level B is non-encapsulated clothing, but requires your own air supply and eye protection. So it's like a coverall with a SCBA. Level C is non-permeable clothing and eye protection. Level D is a work uniform, coveralls, minimal protection. So you can see this picture here. This is your full suit, your level A, you're fully encapsulated with a pack. Level B, you've still got a pack on, but you're not fully encapsulated. Level C, no pack. Level C is just your generic, or level D, excuse me, is your generic work uniform. It's going to be hard to care for patients if you're in bulky protective clothing. So major incident, the entry team is going to go in, grab the patient, and they're probably not going to do any real patient care. They're going to essentially pluck them up, get them deconned, and bring them to you. So you're going to be dealing with two issues: the injury that is from the mechanism. So if they're in a car crash, fire, explosion, and then the injury from toxic hazards. So we're going to dig into explosions a little bit in the next chapter. Airway and breathing problems, you guys know all of this already. This is pretty much common sense. more again in terrorism on blistering, burn agents, nerve agents, all of that stuff. You're not going to be wearing an SCBA as an EMT until you're fire trained. Maybe depending on how Everett wants to run things, maybe he'll do that. In my municipality, we do carry packs on the truck, but we also carry our turnout gear on the truck because we're a small town and we need to be available if we're on a medical and a fire comes in or we're coming back from the hospital, whatever. But we carry all our stuff on the ambulance. We do have a home that we sometimes wear Scott packs to enter just because of the environment, but you're not really going to be doing any of this as an EMT, I don't think, for the most part. And we're at review. Do you guys usually run through the review questions?
Not usually.
Not usually, okay. I think you guys probably all have a pretty good understanding of this stuff. Some of you have some previous experience, and Tommy told you to take the ICS classes. So I'm gonna skip through this. Why don't we take 10 and we can come back in 10 and I'll run through the terrorism chapter with you. I am gonna forewarn you, it's a pretty dry chapter. It's honestly a lot of reading off of a PowerPoint. We're gonna talk about a few different things, but why don't you just take 10, come back and we'll blow through that. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Hopefully you're all back. If not, that's all right. We're gonna get through this. So again, this is a pretty short. I'm sorry, not short. It's actually a pretty lengthy thing. There's about 80 slides or so. It's pretty dry. It's pretty generic. A lot of you are probably already familiar with it, but we're just gonna run through. Please feel free to interrupt me anytime. I like people asking questions. So, without more. You may be called to respond to a terrorist incident during your career. We know that already. We know what we're signing up for. At least I hope most of you do. Especially going into the fireside, you're kind of signing up to be a problem solver. You know, sure, you have a house fire, you call the fire department, but you know, it seems more and more we're doing all sorts of things for the community. You know, your house is flooded. What do? You call the fire department. You have an electrical problem, call the fire department. So you're gonna have to respond to these. It's no secret we had the marathon bombings back in 2013, I believe. These things happen. In addition to those kind of terrorist things, we all know that we have active shooter situations. So we're gonna kind of dive into all of that stuff. What is terrorism? It's been around forever. Extreme acts of violence to make people feel threatened, right? Danger to human life, violate law, intended to coerce a population, influence policy of government, affect the government by mass destruction, assassination, kidnapping, etc. It's more common in other parts of the country. It does happen here. Domestic terrorists have struck multiple times. And I think that we're going to see this forever, for the rest of our lives, really. It's going to be around forever. You're going to have crazy people. You're going to have people that become radicalized in any variety of ways, and they turn to terrorism to achieve their goals. So different types, there's religious extremist groups, extremist political groups, cyber terrorists, single issue groups. I'm not going to go into politics. I'm not going to say what's right, what's wrong. Some people could potentially classify the events down at the Capitol as domestic terrorism. It's just a very broad definition. Also called weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass casualty, mass death, casualties, and massive damage. So weapons of mass destruction, you think Hiroshima, Nagasaki, those kind of things. So when we're talking about this, you have B-NICE and CBRNE. If you're not familiar, B-NICE is biological, nuclear, incendiary, chemical, and explosive. CBRNE is chemical, biological, radiation, nuclear, explosive. Talking about different types of weapons of mass destruction. Explosives have been preferred. So you look back to the original World Trade Center attack back in the 90s. They packed a truck full of explosives, brought it in the parking garage. The marathon bombing was explosives, Oklahoma City, all those types of things. Chemical agents are vesicants, which cause blisters. Respiratory agents are choking agents, nerve agents, and metabolic agents like your cyanides. Biological warfare is a very scary thing. It scares the ever-living hell out of me personally. When you think about our water supplies are open, pretty easy to get in there and pour something in a reservoir, right? Biological warfare is terrifying to me. But there's viruses, bacteria, and toxins. So we are all familiar with viruses right now in today's day and age. Bacteria and toxins are, you guys already know all of this. I'm not going to bore you. Nuclear and radiologic. Again, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The materials are actually pretty easy for people to get their hands on. Dirty bombs will cause panic, obviously. It's pretty scary when you think about it. It really doesn't take much for someone to make something and get on the T in the subway and release something. There's no security like there is getting on an airplane. My personal belief is that we're probably not going to see another airplane attack. I could be wrong, but treatment of your patients is going to stay the same. Remember situational awareness. So going back to the last chapter, pay attention, make sure you're putting yourself first. Recognize that there is a terror event. You're going to see that It's not like they say, hey, by the way, we're planning a terrorist attack for next Tuesday at 11 a.m. You know, it's just going to happen. We don't know when. Sometimes we have a little information from the feds, you know, heightened level of security, but you never know. That's talking about the NTAS. That's an alert from the government for first responders and government agencies can take to maintain safety. On every call, you need to make the type observations, where you are, what type of call, number of patients, victim statements, and pre-incident indicators. Stage your vehicle a safe distance away, wait for law enforcement, do not enter if you have any doubt. Best location for staging, just like hazmat, upwind, uphill, and secondary devices. So they figured out in the marathon bombings, the bombs went off, I forget the exact time frame, but relatively, you know, it was like 30 seconds or a minute apart. That second device was intended to go off later. Secondary devices are designed to injure and delay first responders. So we want to make sure we're always being mindful of that, right? Because we're all going to go running into a situation and they know that they're intended to cause us more harm at the end of it. So just be mindful of that when you're dealing with any of these things. Tanker truck rolled over. Best form of safety is preventing yourself from coming in contact with any kind of agent. So proper PPE. Granted, if we have a nuclear bomb drop on us today, I think we're all pretty much SOL, but use proper PPE that you can for any of this stuff. Cross-contamination is the greatest impact. So us taking a patient that has been exposed, say, to a nerve agent or blistering agent, they're not deconned properly. We put them in our truck, we touch them, and then we get it. If you are finding yourself in one of these situations, the best thing you can do is immediately notify your dispatch, tell them what's going on, any resources, get the hazmat team out, estimated number of patients, best routes of approach, staging. Where are we going to stage? We need trained responders. The only person with PPE, the only persons that can handle a WMD incident like this. You're going to want to establish command until someone else arrives. Someone's going to be your IC. You're going to have to function as triage, maybe as transport supervisor, logistics officer, command staff, medical direction. Going to be doing a little bit of everything in one of these situations. Constant reassessment of scene safety. So if the wind has changed, if there's smoke coming at us or fumes, anything like that, constantly reevaluating, just like on a fire ground. So in terms of chemical agents, there's persistent and non-persistent. Persistent or non-volatile remain on the surface for long periods. Non-persistent or volatile evaporate very rapidly. So each chemical behaves a little bit differently. If it's something that evaporates right away, that makes it easier for us, right? But if it's something that's going to stay there for an extended period of time, that's going to complicate matters for us. How things get in the body. Primarily, these things are going to enter through your skin contact, blistering, things like that. That's your number one entry. You're also going to get entry through your inhalation and ingestion. Most damage to damp and moist areas of the body. If you think someone's inhaled something, if they're complaining of difficulty breathing, they're coughing, they've got some burns in their mouth and their airway, it's going to be problematic. So different types of vesicants, blistering agents, sulfur mustard, lewisite, and phosgene. You guys can read about all of these. They're all different agents that you're gonna have to read about and be familiar with. Gases that cause immediate harm to persons exposed to them. On these respiratory tract. So once in the lungs, they damage the lung tissue and fluid leaks into the lungs. So they destroy your alveoli. They make it harder to breathe. You can't have your I can't think of the word. I don't want to say respiration. Yeah, it's cellular respiration. The actual process of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide exchanging when you breathe. So you're going to develop pulmonary edema because you got fluid in your lungs, difficulty breathing, and gas exchange is impaired. So that's just talking about. Chlorine, first one ever used in warfare, produces upper airway irritation and a choking sensation. Phosgene is from combustion, delayed onset of symptoms. So that's important because you might just kind of be exposed but be okay for a little bit and then later on develop your systems. These are all treated primarily with supportive care. Some of them have antidotes or medications you can give to try and counteract the impacts, but most of that is above the BLS level for the most part. Nerve agents, cardiac arrest, potentially within seconds. So different types of nerve agents. You got your sarin, soman, V-agent, and tabin. That's got a fruity odor. The tabin, sarin's got none if it's pure or strong. Can be all over the place. Soman is fruity. V-agent has no. All of them, again, are primarily skin contact, except for sarin is respiratory. Skin exposure is lethal. All things you want to be aware of. That's why when we go back to the suits, anything involving any of this, you're in a full suit, pack, all of that. Sludgeum, one of my favorite things. Someone who has been exposed to sludgeum, to some of these agents. You can see the thing on your screen here: salivation, sweating, lacrimation, urination, defecation, gastric upset, emesis, muscle twitching, and meiosis. These people are literally going to be leaking out of every imaginable orifice on their body. It's coming out the top, it's coming out the bottom, it's coming out the front, it's coming out everywhere. These people are in deep, deep situations where they need help and they need an antidote to stop this. Dumbbells, same thing: diarrhea, urination, meiosis, which is the pupils, muscle weakness, bradycardia, bronchospasm, or bronchorrhea, emesis, lacrimation, seizures, salivation, sweating. Hydrogen cyanide and cyanogen chloride, both agents affect oxygen. So supportive care, oxygen, really not a whole lot we can do other than that. Dizziness, lightheadedness, headache, vomiting. So similar to CO. Symptoms, talked about cyanide treatment. So cyanide is treated with hydroxycyanide. I can't remember the name of it. There's a drug that we carry at the ALS level. We don't carry it on the ambulances, but we have it in our supervisor cars here, and it's to treat cyanide poisoning. I just want to touch on CO real quick. You guys are, we're all familiar with carbon monoxide. If you go to a house where something just doesn't seem right, multiple people kind of have weird symptoms, maybe have a headache, some nausea, or you look through the window on a well-being check and you find multiple people, passed out, unresponsive on the floor, just consider that. We carry a little meter on our first in bag so that if we go into a house and there is CO, that'll go off, we can get out. Just be mindful of all of that. Ask for help as you need it. In terms of biological stuff, completely undetectable at times, almost. Diseases caused can be similar to other minor illnesses. Something like a pandemic. That's one of the things they try and prep for, is a potential release of a biological agent. Not saying by any means that COVID was intentionally done. Who knows? Maybe it was. We don't know, right? But someone that potentially intentionally releases something like a virus or another biological agent with the hopes of causing, mass illness, death, whatever. It's pretty easy to spread this. So even here, vector, an animal that spreads disease to another animal, potentially have animal to human transmission, who knows? What's going to matter is how easily it's spread, the incubation period, to the appearance of first symptoms. So we heard a lot about this with COVID at the beginning, right? Oh, well, got to quarantine for 2 weeks because you could get it and you could have it for 13 days and then, you know, and be contagious and not be sick until 2 weeks later. We just don't know. So that's going to matter in terms of slowing it. Germs require viruses or germs that require a living host. So again, COVID, the flu, anything like that, they need a living host to thrive off of, replicate themselves and spread through the host, moves through direct methods or through vectors. So certain viruses can go in contact, certain ones are airborne. Smallpox. Don't get smallpox. You see what it does there. It's a virus, but it actually causes blistering. So PPE for smallpox, gloves, HEPA filtered respirator, eye protection. You want to observe the different types of lesions. You don't want to cross-contaminate any of this, and you don't want to get contaminated yourself. This talks about the characteristics of smallpox, aerosolized for warfare or terrorist use. So could somebody release it in an aerosolized manner in, say, a shopping mall? I don't know if any of you watched the show 24 years ago. I binge watched it last summer again. It's really good. There's a lot of this stuff in there. Viral hemorrhagic fever causes the blood in the body to seep out from the tissues and blood vessels. So not great, because you guys have already covered most of anatomy. We know what happens when the blood comes out. It's not great. It's not circulating any oxygen. Your patient is essentially just going to bleed out because they're going to present with these symptoms and they'll have internal, external hemorrhaging. Use precautions. More characteristics of VHF. Bacteria, they do not require a host to multiply and live. So that's why you can see them in the body, you see them outside the body, you see them in the wilderness. Most can be fought with antibiotics. I know some, we do have antibiotic resistant threads. And some people can build a tolerance to antibiotics as well, which is why it's not great to be on them long term. Mostly flu-like symptoms. Inhalation and cutaneous anthrax. So if you guys remember the anthrax scare back in the early 2000s, it's caused by a bacteria. People were sending that in the mail or other white powders that they were trying to trick people to believe was anthrax or anything else. Antibiotics can be used to treat anthrax. The plague, we all know about the plague. Pneumonic plague is a lung infection that results from inhalation of plague bacteria. There you go. Bubonic plague infects the lymphatic system and creates, I'm not even going to try it, buboes. Neurotoxins, they're from plants, marine animals, molds, and bacteria. Enter through ingestion, inhalation, or injection. Not contagious and have a faster onset of symptoms. So your molds, things like that. Botulinum toxin, most potent of the neurotoxins. It's produced by a bacteria, affects the nervous system ability to function. Voluntary muscle control diminishes, and eventually it can cause paralysis leading to respiratory arrest, right? Because we need our muscles to breathe. If our muscles become paralyzed, can't breathe. Ricin, it's another older one derived from MASH from the castor bean. Pulmonary edema and arrest. Stable and toxic. So other rules is the EMT. Syndromic surveillance. Monitor patients presenting to EDs and alternative care facilities. Patients with signs and symptoms that resemble influenza are important. Quality assurance and dispatch need to be aware of an unusual number of calls from patients with unexplainable symptom clusters. So if we're seeing a whole bunch of people with the same symptoms, that's something to be concerned about, because we want to make sure that, I mean, obviously right now we're attributing everything to COVID, any flu-like symptom, but there's other things out there. I was just saying to be mindful of that. Points of distribution, establish time and need for mass distribution of antibiotics, antidotes, vaccines, and medications. Push packs distributed by the CDC and Prevention Strategic National Stockpile. Push packs have a delivery time of 12 hours anywhere in the country. So, as you may be familiar, we heard last spring about the National Strategic Stockpile and how a lot of the stuff in there was expired, no good, whatever. The government does have facilities all over the place across the country that stockpile medications and vaccines, PPE, stuff like that for major scale incidents, and they can be deployed with minimal notice. Radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, and neutron radiation, they go in order there. Don't be shocked if you see something on your national registry about the types of radiation. Ionizing radiation is emitted in the form of rays or particles. So your X-rays, other types of radiation, just be familiar with it. This graphic here shows you a little bit of protection from it. You want to just make sure you're protected with any radiation call. Once it's been used, the remaining is called radiological waste. So power plants, hospitals, some colleges and industrial sites, they have to store or properly dispose of that waste. So like a nuclear power plant, they have those uranium rods. After they're used, they still have the remnants there, and it's still radioactive for some period of time. I believe there's a spot out in like New Mexico or someplace where they get rid of this stuff in the desert. You got radiological dispersal devices designed to disperse radioactive material. A dirty bomb can injure victims. Dirty bomb is an ineffective weapon of mass destruction. Dirty bomb is something that's going to distribute radiation, chemicals, whatever. So this talks about nuclear power plants. Splits an atom in half. That causes energy, and that energy is then used to create more energy for us, usually in the form of electrical power. One thing you guys should be cognizant of, especially working in Everett, is that whole area across the street from where the casino is, back there by the gas tanks and the ports and all that, there is a ton of stuff back there. I got to go on the LNG tanker once because my friend is the second mate. He was previously before he changed jobs. So when the tanker ship came into Everett, he got us on board one time for a tour. There's a lot of fuel there. There's a lot of potential for an oh shit situation there. I'm sure your department pre-plans all that stuff. But a lot of ships are, if they're not diesel powered, they may potentially be nuclear powered. I don't know about any of the ones coming into your port, but just something to keep in mind. Nuclear weapons only in secure facilities. Allegedly, the likelihood of an attack is very low. Who knows with the current situation of the world right now? The whereabouts of most of the nukes is not known. They obviously don't make that public information. I'd be willing to bet that there's multiple places across the country where they keep nuclear weapons. Special atomic demolition munitions, those are like miniature nuclear weapons that can be deployed in the field. They can generally be carried by a soldier, easily transportable, something like that. So it's not a massive, nuclear bomb that you need a giant airplane to drop. Radiation toxicity, if you're exposed to a low amount of severe radiation. I don't know if you remember the I can't remember the name of it, back, I think it was 2000, fall of 2010 or early 2011, there was a big power plant failure in Japan where the firemen were actually just like basically taking turns to spray water on this thing for like days on end, trying to keep it from blowing up. I don't remember how it ended, but there was a ton of radiation exposure there. So just be mindful of that. Make sure you're wearing everything you can. Acute radiation toxicity is when you're exposed right off the bat. So this slide here shows you some side effects. Low exposure, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, headache. Moderate, you're going to get some burns, hair loss, compromisation of the immune system, cancer. Severe exposure, basically second, third degree burns almost instantly, guaranteed to get cancer and die. It's very sad. So we want to be mindful of that and just try and be as careful as we can be and hope we never have to deal with this. Being exposed to radiation does not make you contaminated or radioactive. However, if they have a radioactive source on their body, they need to be cared for by hazmat immediately. So, I don't know, you get called, if you work somewhere with a power plant and the guy that changes the rods happens to go into cardiac arrest while holding the uranium, then I don't know. That's just a bad day for everybody. They have to have an entry team go and get them. Not something you should be doing. Any body fluids need to be disposed of, I guess. I'm not quite sure what that slide's meaning. Once they're deconned, you can begin treating them like you normally would with your primary assessment, your ABCs, and just caring for them like any other patient after they've been deconned. So nothing's going to shield you entirely from radiation. The less time you're there, the better. Make sure that you are stationed far enough away and always assume it is the strongest form of radiation. Use concrete shielding. So ideally, we're on the other side of a building, something like that, that's going to try and help protect us and keep us safe. Incendiary and explosive devices. You guys know what those are. Start fires. Also, go back to playing Grand Theft Auto back in the day, or Molotov cocktails. We saw them used a lot last year in a lot of the social movements, I guess I could say, that were covered on the news nationally after a lot of the stuff last year. We saw a lot of it out in Portland. They were all over the country. Be mindful of that. Things used to start fires, they're going to cause burns to you. There's plenty of videos on the internet of them attacking fire trucks, ambulances, whatever. They don't care. Seems crazy to me, but what do I know? Evacuate the area. Identify the object you believe is a potential device. Remember, there's a possibility of more devices when you respond. So we're going to get into blasts a little bit. So different types of blasts. There's primary blast, secondary blast, tertiary blast, and quaternary blast. Primary blast is the direct effects of a pressure wave on the body, almost always in the hollow organs. So lungs are a hollow organ. They're the greatest for morbidity and mortality. Then you get your secondary blast injuries, so penetrating and non-pretty injuries from flying debris. So let's think for a second. Let's go back to the marathon and think about the construction of that device. Those devices were made out of pressure cookers. They were filled with little ball bearings or BBs, whatever. They're designed to go off, blow off, and send a bunch of stuff spewing everywhere. So what kind of injuries do you think you guys are going to have? I want some participation here.
Penetrating injuries, burn injuries, blast energy.
Yeah, so a lot of different things. Right off the bat, when you think about what injuries we could get from something like that, right off the bat, you saw people with extremity amputations. People had legs blown off. You had a lot of people with hearing injuries from the bang, blast injuries just from that. Let's talk about the injuries that blast knocks you off the feet and you get thrown through the air and then you come crashing down on the sidewalk 40 feet back. More injuries there. So there's a lot of injuries. Burns, a whole lot of stuff that can go on with these things. Tertiary blast is your whole body displacement and subsequent impact with environmental objects. So includes crush injuries. So that is what I was talking about with your body being flown. And quaternary blast injuries, any other injury caused by a blast or gearing. Explosives, obviously we know they're not great for us. There's a ton of injuries that you're going to get with these that you need to be mindful of and thinking about. I'm just trying to move something on my screen here. Toxic effects, so combustion of gases, anything that's used in the making of that bomb could potentially then become an inhalation hazard. Let me make sure I don't miss anything. Penetrating, non-penetrating injuries. So if you're struck by flying debris, propelled and strike the victim. So the physics of a blast, solid or liquid is chemically converted into a gas under high pressure. That's an explosion. Generates a spherical blast wave. Flying debris and high winds commonly cause the conventional blunt and penetrating trauma. So that wind from the blast or the blast itself is what causes most of your injuries. Talked about hollow organs, so ear, lung, GI tract are most susceptible to pressure changes. If any of you are scuba divers, you know about pressure in your ears and your sinuses. Pulmonary blast injuries occur as contusions and hemorrhages. Blast lung is the most common cause of injury, common cause of death from a blast injury. Neurological injuries and head trauma are also common due to just the pressure of the blast, getting thrown, hitting your head, etc. Extremity injuries, well, that I'm sure, I believe some of you were in the military, so you're probably very familiar with IEDs, stuff like that. And we're on to review questions. Who's got questions on any of what we just went over? Again, I know this is a very dry chapter and it's me reading off of a PowerPoint, which I absolutely despise doing, and I know it's terrible for you on the other end. So let's go through some questions. Who's got questions?
Yeah, can you just run through that whole thing again?
Can you say that one more time for me?
I was just joking. I asked if you could repeat the whole thing again.
Oh, I mean, if you want to, I will. But we can run through some of these review questions. Tommy was hoping that this lecture would eat up about an hour of your time. I think
Number one's going to be A.
Yep. So that is most likely an abortion clinic, single issue group. Great.
So I actually got that question on one of the quizzes about the abortion clinic. Why would it not be a religious extremist group or a political extremist group?
I have no idea. That's the National Registry at its finest, I'd say. They're calling it a single issue group because allegedly their single issue is abortion. They believe that that's the only reason that they're protesting, bombing, whatever. I'd consider an extremist group, but if it's a single issue, that's just how they at the registry consider it, I guess. It's really the best answer I can give you. We heard a lot about, you hear single issue voters during an election time, things like that. I don't really know, to be honest. Weaponization is defined as what? Correct answer is C. Creation of a weapon from biological agent generally found in nature and causes disease. So that's taking a naturally occurring thing and making it into a weapon. Daily advisory to keep the public aware of current terrorist threat. What does an orange level indicate?
B.
Yes. Indicates a higher risk of terrorist attacks. Red is the highest level, indicates severe risk of terrorist attacks. Yellow or elevated indicates significant risk. Blue is guarded, indicates general risk. I don't know if I've ever seen it blue. It's not something I check every day, but just out of curiosity, I'm going to look it up right now, and I'll tell you guys what I find. The threat level is currently at yellow. New York City is currently orange. But yeah. Dispatch to a bombing along with 15 other units. Upon arrival at the scene, you should stage your ambulance where?
B.
That's upwind, uphill. Any hazmat incident, stage away. Hazardous chemical may be released. Terrorists would most likely use a secondary device Y.
D.
D, right? They're trying to take out the rescue workers. Patient who is exposed to a vesicant agent is likely to encounter what? Well, we talked about vesicants are blistering agents, so A, you're going to expect to see skin blistering. Sulfur mustard, what does it do? I know we didn't really cover that in depth. Causes cells to mutate, which changes the structure of the cell so it can no longer perform its functions within the body. Causes cellular death, which can lead to end organ failure. When all your organs fail, your body dies. What that's saying is it mutates the cells and damages them to the point where they can't work anymore, and they become useless to your body. Cells take all the oxygen. Without the oxygen, they die. Cells die, organs die, body dies. That's a good one. 8. What is this a sign of?
Is it A?
Nope, it's not A.
B.
Yep, it's B. So nerve agent. You can potentially see some of these sludgem effects on certain types of overdoses as well, like medication overdoses. It's not common, but if they take enough of the wrong stuff, you might see it. I believe it's organophosphate overdose, but I could be wrong. I'll look it up before you guys come in this afternoon. Plastic factory, where there's numerous people with shortness of breath, flushed skin, and altered mental status. Patient tells you he smelled almonds before he started feeling sick. These are most likely
C.
what? C. Cyanide is always almonds.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey,
Yeah. What has the greatest impact on radiation? We covered that one pretty thoroughly, I think. It's D. Time, distance, and shielding. That is the end of the review questions. I don't think Tommy's going to have anything more for you guys. What time do you come in for class?
1 p.m.
Not till 1. All right, hang out for like 5 minutes. Let me just check with Tommy, make sure he doesn't have anything else he wants to go through.
Sounds good. Thanks.
G.
Hey, what's your name, kid?
All right, guys, so I am gonna cut you loose. Tommy wants you to work on some adaptive testing on EMS testing before you guys come in today. So just take some time on your own or however you guys normally do it. Do some adaptive testing and then come in for class at 1. Does anyone have any questions on any of the 2 lectures? I can do my best to try and go over things again.
No, appreciate your time. It was good.
I know it's a pretty dry chapter and it's a lot of just death by PowerPoint, so. All right, if no one else has anything else, I'll hang out for a few on here, but otherwise we'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Sounds good. Thank you.
See you guys.